to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to give you all, or as many of you as I can, a chance to answer this, but could you summarize some of the requirements, the identification requirements, the things that seem reasonable at first, but then tend to disenfranchise voters when they register or try to vote? Could you give me a brief summary of what some of those things are?
I'd be delighted. And of course, it's a very state-specific inquiry because different communities in the state.
Some of these are proposed maybe, and some of them are in place already in states.
But also the communities are different, and they will have different needs and different access. But one of the things that make us provide further study and inquiry is whether or not it's a very limited list of identification, whether or not it has to be government issued, and who that government can be. It is whether or not there is an alternative for folks who are eligible but are that don't have that kind of identification, and how accessible is that alternative. And the other measure is what other measures are in place. Is this a redundant barrier? Some of the challenges that we are seeing with these laws is that at every step in the process, there is a barrier that is hard for some people to overcome. And when you have these duplicative...
What type of barriers?
So let's take a situation in a state that has a restriction on a voter registration group, right? You have people that are not eligible to vote. I'm sorry, you have people that are not voting. A community wants to go in and register them, but can't because they can get hit with fines if they don't do everything perfect, or they have to go through some training by some petty bureaucrat. So you have one barrier to getting on the ballot that way.
Training. You would be opposed to having some kind of training?
No, but I think there's training, but then there's a requirement for training that is onerous and inaccessible, like some of the things that are concerning folks in Tennessee, like some of the things that were underlying some of the concerns we had in the Florida case that Dale mentioned earlier.
Let me give Dale a chance to answer. Sorry, Mr. Ho and Ms. Chapman. Mr. Ho.
Sure. So I think an example of a law that might sound harmless to some people, but when it operates in practice is quite devastating for voter registration is one that I mentioned in my opening remarks, a law that Kansas had that required people to show a birth certificate or a passport when registering to vote in order to establish that they're United States citizens. Don't take it from me, take it from the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, which in a unanimous opinion in 2016 by Judge Jerome Holmes, who was appointed by President George W. Bush, found that the law had caused a mass denial of a fundamental constitutional right. The court's words, not mine.
Mass denial of a fundamental constitutional right.
Correct.
Ms. Chapman, could you give me an example?
Sure. I wanted to talk from personal experience, having been a voting rights advocate on the ground in states. I worked in Wisconsin along with
Can you
Mr.
do it in
Ho.
about 30 seconds?
Sure.
Yeah.
I actually met a woman who was 90 years old. She was born in Mississippi at home to a midwife, and she did not have the ability to get a voter ID that was required by the state because she never had a birth certificate, and her daughter actually had to spend over $2,000 in legal fees in order for her to obtain those types of documents. She had been a poll worker her entire life.
I've
she
got
never
a
missed
minute
an
and
election.
20 seconds left, so
Yes,
thank you very much.
sure.
So would you say that these disproportionately disenfranchised minorities?
Yes, disproportionately disenfranchised
What
people
about you,
of
Ms.
color.
Perez?
I would say that people that have, yes, because people that are more on the margins, that have lives that are more complicated, that are unable to overcome these barriers, which because of poverty and other systems are likely to fall more on minority groups.
Let me tell you something and ask you a question. Everything you've given me is a requirement to purchase a gun. So all of the requirements that you say disenfranchise minorities from and give them mass denial of a fundamental constitutional right are in place in many states, in some states, to purchase a gun or to carry a gun. How would it not also disenfranchise minorities to have these requirements to purchase or carry a firearm? Ms. Perez.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question. Do you mind repeating?
All of the requirements that you say to vote that disenfranchise disproportionately minorities are requirements in one state or another to purchase or carry a firearm. How does that not disenfranchise people of their Second Amendment constitutional right as well? Or wouldn't you agree with me that it does?
I think this is not the kind of setting or time to be able to discuss this.
All right, I think I appreciate you helping me to make my point. I would like to submit two documents to the record. For the record, ask unanimous consent. The first one is presentation to Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity, a suggestion and some evidence by John R. Lott Jr., Crime Prevention Research Center.org. And then another one is a Chicago Tribune article by the same author, John R. Lott. Commentary, apply background checks for gun purchases to voting. In other words, this is a document about what would happen if we used the NICS background check, which does check on whether you're illegal immigrant, non-immigrant, visa, or has renounced citizenship, which has been highly lauded by Democrats as a way to vet people to exercise their constitutional right.
Yes,
Let's
indeed.
get those to the record.
Well, without any objection, and I look forward to reading those. And I take it from the gentleman's questioning that you agree with the witnesses, at least these three witnesses, that these are unlawfully burdensome restrictions that are being imposed on the right to vote.
I agree that they are the same restriction on the Second Amendment as they are on the right to vote, and the Second Amendment is a constitutional right which is enumerated in the Constitution.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, this will be fun for us to pursue this question.